In the sweltering expanse of Suncrash Valley, the very air shimmered beneath the relentless glare of twin suns at their midday zenith. That land of scorching desert stretched far beyond any mortal eye could perceive, dotted only sparsely with the bleached remains of long-dead caravans or the rusted hulks of abandoned war machines from bygone eras. Winds whipped fine, scorching sand across ancient dunes, and ephemeral mirages wavered, half-tempting travelers with illusions of unreachable oases. Yet, in that austere emptiness, life found a way to cling, though it often did so in tenacious or even savage forms. A lone figure made his pilgrimage under that punishing sky, forging a slow path across dunes that rose and fell like a turbulent sea of sand. His name was Ryke, a soldier of fortune, or so he sometimes called himself. Though soldiering in Suncrash Valley was a doomed vocation, unless one possessed both tremendous skill and uncanny luck. From a distance, Ryke cut a tall silhouette, face half swaddled in protective cloth, shoulders hunched beneath a battered rucksack, boots caked in dusty grime. An old energy rifle, slung across his back, served as both guard and reminder of conflicts fought and nearly forgotten. There was a weariness to his footsteps, for no man roamed Suncrash Valley without reason or desperation. Now, Ryke's business was his own. He had roamed these wastes seeking rumored caches of lost technology, left behind by the vanished Empyrean core. Stories told of sealed vaults, brimming with advanced weaponry or gene laboratories that had once shaped entire races. Rumor or not, the notion of precious salvage or valuable secrets had drawn countless fortune seekers into this land of scorching ruin. Few returned, yet Ryke, with the stubbornness of a desert boar, pressed onward, determined that some revelation would reward his perseverance. On that fateful afternoon, as he crested a dune that overlooked a shimmering plain, Ryke halted, his eyes, keen despite the punishing sun, beheld movement across the sands, a swift blur weaving between half-buried boulders. He lowered himself into the lee of the dune, glancing warily about. Bandits and warlords were numerous in these parts, though not all of them were fully human. Indeed, rumors abounded of bestial folk hybrid creatures with strong, animalistic features who prowled the fringes of the civilized realms. Feared and despised for reasons older than memory, Ryke carefully unslung his rifle, checking its old power cell. Faint hums told him there was still a modest charge. He cursed the dryness in his throat. Water was scarce, his canteen nearly empty, and neither man nor beast might endure the scorching sun for too long without refreshment. Nonetheless, he steadied himself and stared out, searching for signs of friend or foe. Then, quite abruptly, the dune beneath his feet collapsed, a hush of sliding sand upending his vantage. Ryke tumbled forward, fighting to keep his balance. He landed heavily near the base of the dune, stirring up a cloud of powdery dust. Before he could scramble to his knees, a guttural snarl vibrated the air. A lithe figure, half shadowed by the swirling sand, sprang upon him with startling swiftness. In that fleeting instant, Ryke glimpsed feral, golden eyes, pointed ears pricked with alarm, and strong limbs adorned with patches of sleek fur. The creature's face, though shaped in the general mold of a woman's, possessed an undeniably bestial cast, sharper canines, prominent cheekbones, and a perpetual tension in the muscles of her jaw. If rumor spoke truly of such beast folk, then she must have been one of that fierce and seldom trusted clan. She pinned Ryke against the shifting sands. He felt the press of sharp claws at his throat, but he also saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, as though she weighed the merits of simply tearing out his throat or parlaying for some advantage. Her voice, when it came, was low and rasping, but not without clarity. "You carry good gear," she hissed. "And you smell of strength, soldier man. Are you from the Empire or one of the warlords? Dogs." Ryke stiffened, his chest heaving against the tight grip. He noted the battered leathers strapped across her torso, the improvised holster that bore a small energy pistol on her hip, and the faint brand upon her shoulder, unfamiliar in form. She exuded a savage confidence. But beneath that, he sensed an intelligence that refused to be dismissed. "I serve no one," he said after a moment, his voice rasping. "I'm alone, just traveling. Let me go. I mean you no harm." She barked a short laugh, cocking her head. "No harm? Indeed. Then you'll hand me your weapons." He hesitated, meeting her gaze. Under different circumstances, Ryke would never have conceded such a thing. But the claws pricking his throat left him with limited options. "If it spares my life, I'll consider it," he replied, trying to sound more cavalier than he felt. Yet the Beastwoman did not immediately demand his rifle. Instead, her lips peeled back in what might have been a scornful grin. "I know your kind mercenaries, scavengers. They come to Suncrash seeking lost riches and secrets. They almost never leave. Perhaps you're different, or perhaps you're just another fool." With that, she yanked him to his feet. She stood a head shorter than he, but that impression of lithe power did not lessen. Her tail lashed once in annoyance. "I'll say this, I, too, have wandered these dunes. There is no easy salvation in Suncrash. Even the warlords live on borrowed time. My name is Zara." She bared her teeth when she spoke the name, as though daring him to question it. "I'm not a docile wanderer who begs for scraps, soldier man. I claim what I want." Ryke swallowed against the dryness in his throat. "What do you want from me?" She paused, eyes studying him, as though sifting his worth. "Food, water, ammunition, a companion to watch my back. And since I have you at my mercy, I shall take it all." She brushed a claw along his chest harness. "I'd prefer not to kill you just yet." Her arrogance struck Ryke to the core, but he sensed also the desperation behind her ferocity. Anyone surviving in these sands must be driven by some deeper purpose or necessity. "You have my attention," he said carefully. "But if you take everything, I'll not last an hour in this heat." Zara let out a throaty chuckle. "Then you'll stay with me. My spoils, so to speak." She leaned in, her breath hot against his ear. "Call me captor, or call me protector. So long as you obey, I'll keep you alive." Such a claim set Ryke's teeth on edge, but the alternative was immediate confrontation, one he might not survive. He nodded, albeit stiffly. "Very well, I'll follow. But let's not tarry here. The dunes shift, and if we're caught in a sandstorm, both of us might be buried alive." She gave another curt laugh. "Wise. Come along, soldier man." Together, they set out, forging across the burning sands in silence. Ryke kept an eye on Zara, noting the slight limp in her stride, the tense set to her shoulders. She was no carefree predator in her prime. She had suffered hardships, just as he had. For a time, the only sound was the crunch of shifting grains beneath their boots and the distant, hollow wail of the desert wind. At length, they reached the shelter of a rocky outcropping, where an overhang cast merciful shade across the hot sands. Within that shade, remnants of a small camp were visible, a burnt-out fire ring, a battered canteen, and scattered footprints. Zara jerked her chin toward a narrow crevice in the rock. "We can hole up there until the worst of the day's heat has passed. Then we move again by twilight." Ryke was about to reply, when a faint rumble in the distance drew his attention. He turned to see a swirl of dust, rising against the horizon, like a plume of steam from a boiling pot. If his eyes did not deceive him, that was the signature of old desert speeders, or an armored transport tearing across the dunes. Already the noise was intensifying. "Raiders," he muttered, stepping closer to the outcropping for concealment. Zara's ears twitched in alarm. "Possibly. The warlord Ereda hunts these lands, capturing or killing anything of value, rare technology. Travelers. Beast folk like me." She spat the last words. "We must remain hidden. If we're found, the best we can hope for is a quick death." Ryke narrowed his eyes, hearing in her tone a bitterness that exceeded mere caution. He crouched behind a boulder, sliding his rifle forward in readiness. Zara joined him, tensing like a coiled spring. Moments later, the source of the rumble appeared, a trio of rugged, dust-caked vehicles surging across the desert floor, each bristling with improvised armor and gun turrets. Faded symbols of a black hawk soared upon their side panels, Irita's sigil. If rumor held true, the caravans thundered past, oblivious to the pair concealed among the rocks. Only when the roar of engines receded did Zara exhale. A slight tremor coursed through her, and Ryke realized she had truly feared their discovery. He studied her for a moment. How had this woman, this Beastwoman, become an outcast here, with only her wits and feral strength to safeguard her? "I've seen worse warlords," he whispered, hoping to stir conversation. She shook her head. "Irita is not to be trifled with. She's cunning. She hunts for things beyond mere loot. She searches for an ancient vault rumored to lie somewhere beneath these sands. I suspect that's why you're wandering here as well." Her lip curled. "You men from beyond the desert all yearn for the same illusions." Ryke tensed at her accusation, but did not outright deny it. "I only heard rumors that the Empyrean Corps left behind secret installations. That's all. Why does Irita seek them so fervently?" Zara's gaze flicked toward him. "Because those installations hold knowledge of the old gene trials, experiments done on beastfolk. My people were not born by nature's whim, but shaped in labs by imperial scientists who wanted living weapons. If Irita can harness those secrets, she can create unstoppable armies of monstrous thralls." Ryke felt a chill, despite the desert heat. "You speak as one who knows these truths firsthand." She shrugged, a small, bitter gesture. "I heard the stories from my clan elders before I was exiled. I did not believe them at first, but Irita's interest, her hunts confirmed them. Now I wander alone, forging alliances with those who can help me survive. Or I simply take what I need." She offered him a meaningful look. Ryke inhaled deeply, the gritty air scratching his lungs. He recalled the old rumors: super soldiers, beast-like clones, entire species shaped in antiseptic labs to serve as shock troops for the old Empyrean Corps. The thought of encountering the remains of such research was disquieting, to say the least, but he could not deny a small flicker of curiosity. If such a vault lay close at hand, perhaps it held keys to a future far beyond desert survival. Nightfall was a slow, merciful event in Suncrash Valley. The scorching daylight receded, replaced by a faint breeze that carried cooler air. Shadows stretched over the dunes like dark serpents. Overhead, the cosmic tapestry gleamed with a million stars, unobscured by city lights or pollution. In that half-lit realm, Zara beckoned Ryke forward. "If we travel at night, we avoid the worst heat and the watchful eyes of raider convoys," she explained. "We can make better progress." "I'll follow," Ryke said, though his mind was alight with questions. She had effectively declared him her prisoner or spoil. Yet their dynamic felt more like an uneasy alliance than a strict captivity. He recognized that he had precious few choices. The desert was lethal, and traveling alone without water or supplies would be an ill-fated gamble. They progressed steadily across the dunes. Their footfalls crunched upon the hardened sand that the scorching sun had baked. Occasionally, they paused to rest near a formation of ancient rocks or beneath a battered hull that once belonged to some enormous transport craft. During those brief interludes, Ryke stole glances at Zara. He noticed how her ears constantly shifted to pick up distant sounds. He realized she listened to the desert in a manner no ordinary human could match. At one such stop, Ryke ventured a question. "How long have you roamed alone?" She cast him a sidelong look. "Long enough." Then, with her usual directness, she returned the inquiry. "And you're not a local?" He nodded. "I left my old mercenary band some months back. We made a pact to search the wastelands for technology we could sell. One by one, they fell to raiders, to thirst, or to hidden dangers. Eventually, I was the only survivor." Zara said nothing, but her gaze softened a fraction. Perhaps in those few words, she recognized a reflection of her own lonely path. They pressed onward through the night. Sometime around midnight, when the desert's chill crept into their bones, they topped a ridge that revealed a broad expanse below. In the moonlight, Ryke discerned the silhouette of twisted metal structures jutting from the sand, half buried and ancient in their aura. An unsettling hush seemed to emanate from that place, as though the wind itself dared not linger. Zara pointed. I've seen that wreck once before. It is said a subterranean hangar sprawls beneath it, part of an old outpost. We might find supplies or trouble. Let's investigate, Ryke said, heart pounding with mingled dread and anticipation. They carefully descended into the hollow. The massive wreckage revealed partial corridors of reinforced metal, collapsed in places, and swallowed by the ever-shifting dunes. Rusted beams protruded like ribs of a giant beast. As they ventured deeper, they discovered battered crates with the emblem of the Empyrean core. Though water and rations had long since decayed, a few items' energy cells. Old data tablets remained. Ryke carefully collected anything that might prove of use. Lights flickered from some hidden power source, faint at first but unmistakable. It gave the corridor an eerie half-glow, casting flickering shadows against the walls. Zara's ears twitched, and she motioned for silence. They advanced, step by cautious step, rifles and claws at the ready. Presently, they came upon a sealed hatchway. Faded words across its surface read, Subsection AR-LU2. The panel's control console flickered with a weak power light. Ryke knelt beside it, prying open a maintenance panel. In the faint beams of a handheld illuminator, he saw intricate electronics caked with dust, but intact. If we can bypass the security protocols, maybe we can access whatever's beyond, Ryke said quietly. Zara made a rumbling sound deep in her throat. But do we wish to see what secrets lie beyond? Despite her warning, Ryke set to work. His experience in the core's relics served him well. After some tinkering, the console gave a sputtering hum. The hatch shuddered, then slid open with a reluctant screech of metal. A stale odor rushed out air that had lain stagnant for who knew how many decades. Inside, a narrow corridor waited, illuminated by a flickering overhead strip. Ancient grime stained the walls. A sense of foreboding clung to every surface. Zara crept forward, each movement deliberate. Ryke followed, shining his light along the floor. He glimpsed footprints in the dust, some recent, some older. The older prints appeared inhuman, with elongated impressions that might have been left by padded feet or claws. They soon reached a larger chamber, strewn with derelict consoles and data banks. Broken tubes, cylindrical containment vessels lined the walls. Each was large enough to hold a living being. The glass was fractured on many, but a few remained sealed. Their interior surfaces, too fogged with condensation to see what might reside within. This is where they tinkered with genetics, Zara whispered, her voice tight. She peered at the broken containment tubes, the faint memories of her clan's warnings flickering in her eyes. Those cursed scientists who shaped us, twisted us into living weapons. Ryke felt an uncomfortable lurch in his gut. He approached one sealed tube and wiped away a layer of grime. Inside, he could barely discern the shape of something. Whether it was a partial specimen or a lifeless husk, he could not say, and he decided not to linger. A sudden beep drew his attention to the largest console near the center of the chamber. Its screen flickered with faint, ghostly lines of text. Approaching carefully, he activated a power toggle. With a low hum, the console awakened, displaying static-laden readouts, Project Synthesis, Sector AR-LU2 Subject Class, Anthropomorph Variant 3D, Feral Beastwoman. Primary function, enhanced agility, heightened senses, accelerated healing. Status, decommissioned. Zara froze, reading those words over Ryke's shoulder. Though the text was faint and incomplete, it hammered home a truth she had long suspected. She and her kind were not children of nature, but the byproduct of unscrupulous war research. A hiss interrupted the silence. One of the sealed tubes behind them suddenly began venting, as though the ancient systems had awakened from dormancy. Steam vented through cracked seams. The interior lights flared, revealing the shape of a creature within. Ryke spun, aiming his rifle. Zara crouched, claws extended. With a groan of metal, the tube's door slid open, and out slumped a ragged figure, vaguely resembling Zara in its bestial features. But this one seemed half mad, eyes wide and unfocused. It emitted a keening moan of pain. Its body was riddled with scar tissue, and the hair along its arms and shoulders was patchy and brittle. For a moment, it scrambled forward on all fours, then collapsed, chest heaving. Zara advanced cautiously, chest tight with a swirl of emotions, empathy, fear, perhaps even horror. She knelt by the creature, careful not to let it seize her. The creature's breath rattled. Its dull gaze flicked to Zara, and a tremor passed through it. In a halting, guttural imitation of speech, it croaked, "Hell, help, end, pain." Zara hesitated. Then, with a soft snarl that might have passed for pity, she pressed her claw against the creature's throat. A swift motion ended its suffering. The creature went limp, eyes turning glassy. A heavy silence descended, broken only by the faint hum of the decrepit machinery. Ryke, swallowing his shock, reached out a hand, lightly resting it on Zara's shoulder. She did not pull away, nor did she acknowledge him. Her gaze remained locked on the pitiful remains of what might have been her kin, a living testament to the cruelty that had birthed them all. At length, she rose, breath shuddering. "Now you see the truth. This place, these experiments created us, and many others like us, locked away in tubes for centuries, never truly alive." Ryke inhaled, searching for words that would not come easily. "I'm sorry," he said at last. "No one should have endured this." She spun on him, anger mingling with grief in her expression. "Then help me ensure no one ever does again. Irida seeks to harness these secrets. She'll do worse than the scientists if she learns to replicate their methods." He nodded, meeting her gaze with solemn resolve. "If it's within our power to stop her, we must. But first, let's see what resources we can glean from here, so we can face her more prepared." Zara bared her teeth in a silent snarl of agreement. Together, they combed the chamber, rummaging through broken crates and defunct consoles. A few data slates still functioned, though their screens were cracked. Ryke pocketed them, hoping to extract the intel at a later time. They also discovered a sealed med kit, old but still serviceable, with bandages and a few vials of stimulant. Better yet, in a storage closet, they found a battered water filtration unit. With some tinkering, Ryke managed to coax it back to life. In the desert, such a device was worth its weight in gold. By the time they emerged from that labyrinth of steel and sorrow, a pale dawn was breaking across the horizon. Both were exhausted, bodies caked in sand and sweat, minds haunted by what they had witnessed. In silent accord, they departed the wreck, heading for higher ground where the early sunlight cast long shadows. Atop a rocky incline, they made camp in the lee of a wind-smoothed boulder. Zara stared out across the wasteland, her golden eyes thoughtful. Ryke brewed a weak tea from collected desert herbs, harsh on the palate, but it staved off thirst. The water filtration device hummed quietly, purifying trace amounts from condensation. A hush lingered between them, broken only by the occasional rasp of shifting sand. At last, Zara turned to Ryke. "I have taken you as my spoil, soldier man, but it seems we are bound by a greater cause than either of us foresaw. I apologize for our rough beginning. You gave no offense, but found yourself in my path." He gave a slight shrug. "I'd rather be your ally than your prisoner. Perhaps circumstances have changed." She inclined her head, a subtle sign of respect. "Then let us be allies. I can offer my strength, my senses, and what knowledge I have of the warlords. You offer your skill with machines and your soldiers' discipline. Together, we might outmaneuver Irida before she seizes the vault. But be warned, the path ahead is treacherous." Ryke nodded gravely. He stared across the dunes, recalling the warlord's convoys. "I suspect Irida has more resources than we can imagine. But if she truly aims to find the main vault, then we can be sure she'll leave a trail. For now, we should track her movements and figure out where that hidden installation might lie." Zara flexed her clawed hands. "Yes, and if we're fortunate, we'll be the first to discover it. If we can destroy whatever remains inside, we'll deny Irida her prize. And if I can learn more about my own origins along the way, Perhaps it will free me from the ghosts of the past. Though the day's heat was swiftly rising, a renewed sense of purpose burned in Ryke's chest. He recalled the half-insane creature he had witnessed in that lab, the fragile existence that had known only agony. Whatever monstrous truths lay hidden beneath Suncrash Valley, they had to be brought into the open and obliterated if need be, for the sake of beast folk like Zara, for the sake of any who still believed in more than raw brutality. This fight was worth waging, so began their alliance, as precarious as a dune perched in the shifting desert winds, yet strong enough to defy the swirling chaos that enveloped them both. Tomorrow, perhaps, they would unearth more secrets or run headlong into Arita's warbands. But for this moment, they were alive, united, and determined. That alone was a form of victory. With that unspoken pact, they settled into a wary rest, the suns climbing once more to their relentless station overhead. The dune-lashed wind swept across them, bearing the faint echoes of ancient tragedies and the faint hope of a new dawn. They lingered by the boulder until the heat became unbearable, then retreated into the partial shade. Despite their exhaustion, neither drifted into true sleep. The memory of that pitiful creature in the tube haunted Zara, its final plea for help echoing in her mind. Ryke, too, found no peace. His soldier's instincts remained on alert, cautioning that danger might appear at any moment. When the sun reached its zenith, even the shadows seemed to bake. The rock radiated heat. Their water supply, though somewhat replenished by the makeshift filtration device, remained pitifully meager. Ryke removed his chest harness to relieve the pressure and carefully cleaned his rifle's focusing lens. Zara, crouched in the shade, her tail swishing in slow arcs, studied the horizon with narrowed eyes. In a measured tone, she spoke. "You said you once traveled with others, your mercenary band. Did they ever come close to the warlords?" Ryke exhaled a weary sigh. "We had minor skirmishes, but never confronted Arita's forces directly. My commander was cunning, choosing to avoid large battles. He valued stealth and speed over direct confrontation. That served us well until we delved too far into the desert." Zara peered at him, ears perked. "What happened?" He frowned, remembering the day all too clearly. "We chased rumors of a crashed dreadnought that carried advanced technology. We found it, but we also found something else, a nest of mutant beasts that overran our camp at night. The few of us who survived scattered. Some tried to fight back. I barely escaped." She studied him, her sharp gaze measuring his every reaction. At length, she spoke softly. "Survival is not cowardice. In this land, only the truly fortunate or truly ruthless remain." Ryke appreciated her remark more than he cared to admit. As the hours wore on, they discussed how best to proceed. They reasoned that Arita would need a staging area to mount expeditions. In such a harsh environment, an army could not roam aimlessly for long without supplies and water. Logic suggested that the warlord had established a base of operations somewhere near accessible wells or cisterns. When the day finally relented and dusk returned, they gathered their scant belongings and set off toward a rumored oasis, a place that some travelers called the Cracked Bowl. Ryke had heard it mentioned among desert wayfarers, though he knew few details. The name conjured images of a dried-up basin, perhaps containing a single well or trickle of water. If Arita's forces were nearby, perhaps they would glean more intelligence. The journey was arduous, though the desert's nighttime chill came as a grim blessing. Their boots sank into patches of loose sand. In the distance, the shape of a broken tower jutted from the dunes, one of countless ancient spires whose origin was lost to time. Occasionally, they saw shapes flit along ridgelines, but whether these were wildlife or Arita's scouts, they could not say. Midnight found them cresting a final rise, from which they spotted a shallow depression stretching across the land below. Indeed, it looked like a colossal bowl cracked by age, its edges rimmed with rock formations that jutted upward like jagged teeth. In the moonlight, Ryke could discern dark blotches that might have been tents or vehicles. A faint glow flickered from fires or lanterns. Zara dropped to a crouch, beckoning Ryke to do the same. Her ears twitched. I smell something. Machines. A fuel. Arita's people must be camped there, Ryke nodded, peering through a small set of battered binoculars. Sure enough, clusters of tents were arrayed across the cracked basin floor, with at least 4 large, armored vehicles situated in a semicircle. Figures moved among them, though it was impossible to identify their allegiances at this distance. We should scout from a closer vantage, Ryke whispered. Zara considered the suggestion. If we get too close, they may have patrols. I can move quietly if I go alone. You would have to remain hidden. Ryke was about to protest, but he recognized that her heightened senses and animalistic stealth might be invaluable. He clenched his jaw. All right, but be careful. If anything goes wrong, I'll provide covering fire if I can. She flashed a grin that displayed her sharp canines. A soldier's loyalty is comforting, though we barely know one another. With that, she was gone, slipping into the darkness with uncanny grace. Ryke positioned himself behind a rocky outcrop that overlooked the basin. The minutes crawled by, each second fraught with tension. He scanned the camp through his binoculars, picking out details: armed guards at perimeter fires, large crates stacked near the vehicles, silhouettes gathered around a central bonfire. At one point, Ryke saw a figure stagger from a tent, face illuminated briefly by the glow. It was a woman clad in dark armor, her left arm covered in mechanical plating. She wore a cowl that framed a cruel, angular face. Though he had never seen Arita in person, the aura of command she radiated suggested this was the warlord herself. She gestured sharply at underlings, her face twisted in what might have been anger or impatience. Time crept on. Ryke's heart pounded, worry festering in his mind. Zara was nowhere in sight. He feared she might have been captured or killed. He scanned the camp relentlessly. Nothing. The wind picked up, moaning softly across the crags. At length, he could bear it no longer. He had to either check on her or a faint scuff of sand alerted him. He turned to see Zara, crouched behind him. Her breathing was quick, but otherwise she seemed unharmed. They have scouts, she whispered. We must keep our voices low. Ryke nodded, gesturing for her to continue. She drew in a breath. I circled near the outskirts. It's definitely Arita's main encampment. They have at least 30 fighters, plus a handful of savage mercenaries. Some are beast folk. She spat those words, clearly disgusted that some of her kin had allied themselves with the warlord. They're preparing for a large expedition soon. I overheard references to a coordinate, something about traveling northeast at dawn. Ryke frowned. That's useful. Did you hear anything about a vault? She nodded. They spoke of an entry point discovered in a region known as the Glass Flats. Arita claims it leads directly to the old facility's deeper levels labs, data repositories. Who knows? A surge of resolve stiffened Ryke's spine. We have to get there first. Zara's ears lowered, betraying her concern. They have vehicles, supplies, and numbers. We cannot simply race them on foot. He thought fast, scanning the desert horizon. If we sabotage their vehicles before dawn, we might delay them. At the very least, we can buy ourselves time. Then, we slip away, heading northeast along a different route. She considered his plan. It's dangerous. One misstep, and we'll be swarmed by their guards. Ryke mustered a small, determined smile. This is your chance to see how cunning your spoil can be. Zara stared at him for a moment, then nodded, her voice hushed. Very well, let's do it. But no foolhardy heroics. We strike swiftly, thus decided. They descended from their vantage point. The camp sprawled below. The dull glow of lanterns revealed a perimeter watch, but the watchers were spread thin, presumably trusting the desert's emptiness to shield them. Ryke and Zara, creeping behind boulders and skirted dunes, drew ever closer. A tension coiled in Ryke's chest, like a compressed spring. He recalled covert missions from his mercenary days, the hush before infiltration. In truth, few missions carried such high stakes. Arita's ability to unlock the old labs might condemn countless lives to new horrors. They reached the edge of the camp's perimeter, A single guard stood with his back turned, scanning the horizon through a pair of night vision goggles. Ryke inched behind him, rifle raised. But Zara moved first, with a speed that defied comprehension. Her claws flashed. The guard collapsed soundlessly into the sand. They pressed on, weaving among crates stacked near the vehicles. The war rigs were monstrous things, with thick treads and reinforced plating. Each was powered by a fusion generator that emitted a faint hum. Sabotaging them would require cunning. Ryke removed a small toolkit from his belt, selecting a microcharger that could overload delicate electronics if attached properly. Zara kept watch while he pried open a service hatch on the lead vehicle. A nest of cables greeted him, lit by a red emergency diode. Carefully, he located the main power regulator. With practiced hands, he spliced in the microcharger. It blinked green, signifying it was armed. One vehicle down. If all went well, the generator would short-circuit the moment they attempted to start it. But there were 3 more rigs. They moved on to the second, repeating the process. Ryke's palms were sweaty despite the cool desert night. At one point, footsteps echoed nearby. Zara flattened herself against the hull, motioning Ryke to remain still. A pair of guards trudged past, muttering about meager rations. Once they disappeared, the pair resumed their sabotage. The third rig proved trickier. Its hatch was locked. Ryke used a small plasma cutter, wincing at the faint hiss it made. Inside, he found a more advanced design, possibly a newer model Arita had recently captured. It took him precious minutes to bypass the security panel. All the while, Zara perched like a sentinel, ears swiveling at each distant sound. Eventually, Ryke succeeded, planting the sabotage device among the rig's electronic innards. They edged toward the fourth and final vehicle, a massive transport. Voices drifted from within its open cargo bay guards or tech specialists. Perhaps the sabotage would be riskier, but they could not leave one rig operational. Summoning his courage, Ryke gestured for Zara to remain near the entrance. He crept toward the open hatch, hugging the shadows. Inside, a dim overhead light revealed crates of ammunition, energy cells, even what looked like a handful of stasis pods, probably to store captured specimens. Ryke winced at the thought. A single guard leaned against a crate, half dozing. Another guard sat on a metal bench, cleaning a sidearm. Their conversation was low, punctuated by yawns. Ryke inched toward the transport's power core. This model had a side panel accessible from the interior cargo bay. He silently cursed the lack of external access. Carefully, he lowered himself behind a stack of crates, heartsick with the knowledge that a single misstep would mean certain death. He extracted another sabotage charge, set it to prime. The guard who had been dozing suddenly jerked upright. "Did you hear that?" he muttered. Ryke froze, breath catching in his throat. The other guard paused in cleaning his weapon. "Hear what?" "Something, like a scratching sound." The second guard snorted. "This desert has you paranoid. Go check if you're so sure." Unfortunately, that was exactly what the dozing guard did. He hefted his weapon, stepping toward the stacked crates where Ryke lay hidden. Ryke's mind raced. He couldn't afford a direct firefight. Too many others would be alerted. A subtle shape slipped into the bay Zara. With lethal grace, she sprang behind the unsuspecting guard, clamping a hand over his mouth as her other claws raked across his throat. He gurgled, struggling weakly, before she dragged him behind the crates. The second guard noticed the motion too late. He rose, startled. Ryke, seeing his chance, aimed a stun bolt from his rifle. The shot took the guard in the chest, silencing him before he could shout an alarm. Swiftly, they tucked the unconscious man out of sight, though the first guard was clearly beyond saving. Zara wiped her claws on a rag, expression grim. "Hurry." Ryke nodded, prying open the side panel. This power core was more complex, fed by multiple conduits. He set the sabotage charge at the main junction, trusting that the overload would cascade through the system. That done, they hurried out of the transport, tension thrumming in their veins. At last, they slipped back into the night, making for the outskirts of the camp. Alarms had not yet sounded, but they knew time was short. Once they returned to the open desert, they quickened their pace, half jogging across the rolling dunes. Only when they had placed a good mile between themselves and Arita's base did they finally stop, breathing hard. Zara's eyes gleamed faintly in the moonlight. "You are full of surprises, soldier man," Ryke shrugged, adrenaline coursing through him. "You're not so bad yourself." With the eastern horizon just beginning to lighten, they set their course northeast, guided by Zara's recollection of the overheard coordinates. For a time, the night shielded them. As dawn approached, the desert once more grew harsh, the heat beginning its relentless assault. But they were far from the basin now, forging their way into unfamiliar territory. Miles passed in weary trudges. The sun climbed. The desert wind blew fiercely. With water limited, they rationed each sip, depending on the filtration device to glean moisture from the sparse air. At midday, they took shelter beneath an ancient ruin, perhaps once a watchtower. Its stone walls, battered by centuries of storms, still offered a measure of respite. Ryke ventured inside what remained of the tower. Debris littered the floor, and a broken ladder led to a partial second level. He climbed carefully, hoping for a vantage point. From the top, he gazed out over a landscape of ridged dunes. Somewhere out there lay the glass flats, or so Arita's men had said. He wondered if the sabotage had delayed them. Perhaps by now, the warlord's mechanics were swearing in frustration over malfunctioning vehicles. Zara joined him. "I see no sign of pursuit," she observed, scanning the horizon. "Nor do I. Either they've not discovered the sabotage yet, or they're too busy dealing with it. We should keep moving when it's safe." She nodded, her expression distant. "Tell me, Ryke, if we succeed in destroying or sealing off this vault, do you plan to remain in the desert?" He grimaced slightly. "I haven't thought that far. Perhaps I'll find a settlement beyond Suncrash. Maybe a place with decent water and no warlords." She huffed quietly. Such a place might exist in stories, but I doubt it in reality. A flicker of sadness stirred in him. "What about you, Zara? Once you've put the ghosts of your past to rest, what then?" She was silent for a moment, the wind tugging at her hair and ears. "Freedom. That is all I can imagine. No clan obligations, no warlord hunts, no more deadly experiments. Just freedom in the wide world." Her words ignited a small spark of hope in him. Maybe, despite all the cruelty of this land, there was a measure of redemption to be found for them both. They gathered themselves, resting until the sun dipped westward once more. Then they continued their trek, aiming to put as many miles behind them as possible. The terrain gradually shifted, the sand taking on a faint glassy sheen in certain patches, as though fused by an ancient cataclysm. Under starlight, these patches glimmered, reflecting the cosmos overhead. Zara knelt at one such patch, running her claw lightly across the surface. "The glass flats," she murmured. "Legends say a great energy beam was unleashed here during an ancient war, turning the sands to glass. The vault we seek may lie somewhere beneath." Ryke tapped a small handheld scanner he'd found among the Empyrean wrecks. It sputtered to life, displaying a rudimentary map. "The ground beneath us has pockets of metal, possibly old structures. If we move carefully, we might find an entrance, or we might wander for days." The wind picked up, kicking grains of sand against the glassy patches in a ghostly hiss. They trudged onward until they spotted something emerging from the gloom, a series of rectangular shapes that might have been ventilation shafts or collapsed towers. Drawing closer, they found the remains of a once mighty facility. Jagged walls of reinforced metal rose at odd angles, half swallowed by the desert floor. A few sections had caved in, leaving behind twisted girders. In the center of it all, partially exposed by recent shifts in the dunes, lay a massive hatch of heavy steel. Rust and sand partially obscured the markings, but Ryke recognized the Empyrean Corps insignia. The hatch was ringed with deep grooves, as though it could retract into the ground or slide open if powered. Zara approached warily. This must be it, or at least an entrance. But the question is, how do we open it? Ryke knelt by a nearby console, battered by time, but possibly still functional. He brushed away sand, revealing a keypad and a flickering display. If the facility has a backup power source, we might be able to coax it into cycling open. Otherwise, we'd need heavy explosives. Zara's tail lashed once. Explosives would announce our presence to Arita and might bring the whole structure down on our heads. Nodding, Ryke fiddled with the console. The display came to life in flickers, lines of code scrolling incomprehensibly. He input a few override sequences gleaned from the data slates they had collected. For a moment, it seemed the system might cooperate. Then the screen emitted a harsh beep and displayed, "Access denied, power critical." He cursed under his breath. "We need more power. If there's a solar array or generator somewhere, we might route energy here." Zara pointed toward what looked like a collapsed structure to the east. Could that have been a generator bay? They traversed the area, stepping carefully over shards of glass and metal. Indeed, they found half-buried machinery that might once have been a solar collector. Much of it was ruined, but a few panels remained intact, angled toward the sky. With patience, Ryke managed to splice together the wiring. The meager starlight or the soon-to-rise sun might generate enough power to awaken the facility's systems. He rigged a small battery to store the trickle of energy. The hours passed slowly. Before dawn, they tested the console again. To Ryke's relief, it now displayed a status bar, power rerouted, 18% capacity. He attempted an override once more. The screen flickered, then beeped acceptance, manual hatch cycle initiated. Stand clear. A deep rumble shook the ground. Sand cascaded from the hatch's edges as the massive steel slab began to shift. It inched open, releasing a gust of stale air. Zara and Ryke exchanged tense glances, weapons at the ready. Who knew what might lurk in that darkness below? At last, the hatch locked in an open position, revealing a descending ramp and a wide corridor beyond. Faint emergency lights glowed red along the corridor's ceiling, illuminating decades of dust. Zara took a measured breath. "Let's hope we're alone down there." Ryke toggled on a flashlight. "We'll move quickly and quietly. If we find the data cores or anything Arita might exploit, we destroy them." She gave a curt nod, and they ventured inside. The corridor walls were lined with piping and stenciled instructions in the old core dialect. Occasionally, they passed doors leading into side rooms, but many were locked or rusted shut. The air was stale, tinged with chemical odors. Before long, they reached a wide chamber that might have served as a security checkpoint. Rows of scanning devices and heavy blast doors framed the space. A few skeletons lay scattered, some wearing the tattered remains of Empyrean uniforms. The silent testament of how swiftly the Empire had collapsed. Zara scowled. "These people built us, shaped us like living tools, and then vanished, leaving their cursed work behind." Ryke reached for a control panel, pressing a few keys. The overhead lights flickered, illuminating the chamber in a sickly glow. A sign above the doors read, "Genetics Division." He felt a pang of unease. This would be the heart of the vault, the place where the darkest experiments were likely conducted. "We proceed, but stay vigilant." The thick doors groaned open. Beyond lay a network of hallways and labs, reminiscent of the smaller subsection they had seen before, but on a far grander scale. Viewing panels revealed darkened rooms filled with containment pods. Some were shattered, others flickered with power, ghostly shapes shifting inside. A dread hush lay upon everything, broken only by the hum of ancient machinery. They passed one lab with an observation window. Inside, a row of stasis pods lined the far wall. Frost clung to the glass. Dimly, Zara could see silhouettes of what appeared to be beast folk, some akin to her in shape, others more monstrous. Each had the fourth line snaking from their arms, connected to overhead monitors. The monitors blinked faint readouts. Whether these pods still contained living beings or long-deceased remnants was unclear. Zara's claws scraped against the floor as she suppressed a growl. The sight, even from behind glass, stirred her anger and pain. "We have to destroy all of this. It's an abomination." Ryke nodded. gazing at the flickering monitors. If Arita gains control of this technology, she could create an army. The ramifications. He trailed off, swallowing hard. Let's find the facility's main control hub. If we can trigger a meltdown or self-destruct, we might bury it all. Their search led them deeper, through a warren of corridors. Occasionally, they passed malfunctioning drones that scuttled across the floor, sparking from torn wiring. Twice, they encountered locked doors that required manual bypass. Each time, Ryke's experience prevailed. Zara stood watch, senses alert for any sign of pursuit. Eventually, they reached a large chamber bristling with servers and computer terminals. A sign overhead read Primary Control. If anywhere held the key to shutting down this vault, it would be here. They entered, scanning for threats. The room was deserted, though the hum of power suggested certain systems remained active. Dozens of large data towers rose from the floor, pulsating with lines of faint light. A central console displayed a scrawling text, Data Core Stabilizing. Ryke approached, hooking up a data slate. If we can override the system, we might initiate a meltdown of the power core. That should bring this entire facility down. But we must also ensure we have a safe route out before we do. Zara paced near the entrance, ears perked. Work quickly. I feel as though we're not alone. He keyed in commands, navigating the ancient system. Files referencing Project Synthesis and Transgenic Armory scrolled past. Finally, he reached a hidden function. Emergency self-destruct. Access was restricted, requiring a high-level clearance. Groaning inwardly, he attempted to bypass it. The system fought him with each line of code. Zara growled softly, tension radiating through her posture. Hurry. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the vault's intercom. Harsh and triumphant, I see you have beaten me here, Beastwoman. Both Ryke and Zara started, scanning the room. The intercom must be linked to remote cameras. Arita, Zara hissed. The warlord's mocking laugh echoed through the corridors. You thought to sabotage my vehicles without consequence. Foolish. Do you not know that I keep backup transports? I have arrived, and my scouts have encircled this facility. You cannot escape. Ryke typed more frantically, searching for the final override. The system beeped in refusal. She must be near the entrance. If she seals us in, we're trapped, Arita's voice continued. My men have already set charges at the hatch. Surrender now, and I may grant you a merciful death. Otherwise, you will perish in a tomb of your own making, Zara snarled, drawing her pistol. We can't let her have the labs. She'll replicate these abominations. Ryke's eyes narrowed in resolve. I almost have the override. We just need a way out. He scanned the data. Another exit seemed to exist on the facility's lower levels, leading to a subterranean tram system. Possibly. That route still functioned, or was at least open enough for them to escape before the meltdown. Zara braced herself. Then that is our path. Do it. I'll buy you time. Without hesitation, she stepped into the corridor, searching for vantage points. Ryke returned to his hacking. The console beeped, then displayed. Emergency meltdown override armed denter command. He typed a final code from the data slate, and the screen flashed red. Warning. Irreversible cascade reaction ionized. T-15 minutes. Evacuate immediately. A klaxon blared, reverberating through the facility. Red lights strobed, illuminating dust motes swirling in the stale air. Ryke disconnected his data slate, face grim. If they failed to find that second exit, they would share in the vault's destruction. He dashed into the corridor to rejoin Zara. She beckoned him forward, her face set in fierce determination. This way, the signage mentioned a transport sector. They ran, passing labs where stasis pods flickered in final disarray, power systems failing. The entire complex shuddered with the onset of meltdown. Over the intercom, Arita's voice swore, ordering her troops to breach. Gunfire echoed from above. Possibly, the warlord's men had forced their way inside. At the end of a corridor, they found a sealed door labeled Tram Access. Ryke engaged the override, and it hissed open, releasing another gust of stale air. Inside lay a platform adjoining a long tunnel. The tram itself, a sleek but ancient transport car, rested on magnetized rails. Whether it still functioned was uncertain. Zara sprinted onto the platform, scanning for hostiles. Ryke hurried to the tram's control panel, powering it on. The panel flickered, searching for energy. Then, to his relief, it glowed. A sputtering voice announced, "Tram route. Operational. Warning, meltdown in progress." "No kidding," Ryke muttered, activating the departure sequence. Zara joined him, eyes darting to the corridor. Shadows flitted armored figures. Erita's men had found their route. Gunshots rang out, bullets ricocheting off metal. Zara returned fire, forcing the troopers to take cover. The tram hummed, headlights flickering to life. "All aboard," Ryke called, his voice taut with urgency. Zara dashed inside, slamming the door panel. The tram lurched, then glided forward into the darkness of the tunnel. Behind them, muzzle flashes lit the corridor. Bullets pinged off the tram's exterior. A moment later, they were out of range, plunging into a void lit only by intermittent emergency lights. The meltdown sirens grew fainter as they advanced deeper underground. Ryke clung to a support rail, heart hammering. The tram's readout indicated it would emerge on the far side of the glass flats, nearly 2 miles from the main vault. If the meltdown leveled the facility, they might still survive. As if in response to that hopeful thought, a shockwave rippled through the tunnel. The tram vibrated dangerously, sparks bursting from overhead cables. Zara braced herself, fangs bared in a soundless snarl. The meltdown must be escalating. If a portion of the tunnel collapsed, they would be entombed. Despite the tremors, the tram kept moving. Minutes passed in an eternity of rattling, red lights, and the rumble of distant explosions. Finally, they saw a glow up ahead and exit. The tram screeched to a halt at another platform, smaller and half buried in debris. Ryke forced the door open, and they rushed out into an underground loading bay. A large cargo elevator stood to one side, its doors open. They sprinted for it. Ryke stabbed the up button. The elevator rumbled, slowly ascending. It was a tense ride, the overhead lights flickering. Another tremor struck, making the walls groan. Then, with a final lurch, the elevator ground to a halt. Its doors opened onto pale daylight. The desert sky greeted them, and they stumbled out onto solid ground. Behind them, a plume of dust rose from the rocky terrain, marking the hidden exit's location. Barely had they cleared the area when a massive concussion tore through the desert. The ground shook, splitting open in places. A column of fire and smoke erupted where the main vault entrance lay. The meltdown had reached its climax, destroying everything within. Zara shielded her eyes as wind battered them. Carrying grit and debris, Ryke steadied her, blinking against the dust. The unstoppable chain reaction had done its work, erasing centuries of dark experiments and twisted machinery in one brutal stroke. At length, the tremors subsided. A dull roar echoed across the dunes, then faded into the hush of wind. The vault was gone, its secrets reduced to rubble or vapor. Ryke exhaled heavily, turning to Zara. "It's over. Erita won't be able to raise an army from that place." She nodded, though her expression bore a mix of relief and sorrow. "Countless of my kin died there, in captivity, or in stasis. Now, at least, their suffering is ended." They gazed upon the drifting dust cloud. In the distance, an ominous shape appeared atop a ridge. Erita herself, flanked by a handful of survivors. She stared down at them, fury radiating from her stance. Even at this distance, they could sense her rage. She gestured as though in promise of future vengeance. Then she vanished over the ridge, her retinue following. Zara growled low in her throat. "She will not let this go. We've humiliated her, destroyed her prize. She'll hunt us." Ryke's lips pressed into a grim line. "Then we must be ready. If she musters her armies, we'll need allies, supplies. But at least the darkest knowledge of the vault is gone," Zara said quietly. "That alone is worth the price." They moved away from the smoking ruin, hearts heavy but unbroken. Nightfall found them trudging into the open desert once more, steps guided by the faint glimmers of distant stars. Irida remained at large, a threat looming on the horizon, but the monstrous legacy of the vault had been purged, granting the desert a small reprieve from the sins of the past. Yet as they paused beneath the cold starlight, Ryke met Zara's eyes. In them, he saw both sorrow and a fierce determination, a desire to live free of the chains that had once shaped her very existence. He extended a hand, and she clasped it with her clawed fingers. For now, at least. They stood side by side, forging their own destinies amidst the endless sands. Their footsteps carried them northward through the next day, pacing across dunes that seemed to stretch on forever. The meltdown's aftershocks had faded, leaving behind only a faint haze in the sky. With Irida's vow of revenge weighing upon them, each hour brought heightened vigilance. They slept in short shifts, scanning the horizon for dust plumes that might herald the approach of raiders. Between them, a silent camaraderie took shape. Ryke no longer thought of Zara as a captor or a mere traveling companion. The trials they had faced had forged a bond deeper than that. Although her manner remained guarded, she seemed to trust him more. And as for Ryke, he found himself increasingly protective of this feral warrior woman who had once seized him as loot. On the second evening, after leaving the vault, they came upon a solitary outpost perched at the edge of a parched riverbed. A faded sign identified it as Amber Spire Station, though the structure seemed little more than a rusted tower and a few adjoining huts. Ancient solar panels lined a makeshift roof. Half the windows were boarded up. Zara sniffed the air warily. "There's life here, a few souls at least," Ryke nodded, noticing a thin wisp of smoke curling from a chimney. "If they're friendly, we might barter for water or provisions. If not," he let the sentence trail off. Both prepared for trouble as they approached the gate, a rickety metal barrier that was latched from the inside. Ryke knocked, the sound echoing in the stillness. After a moment, a small hatch slid open, revealing a single suspicious eye. "What's your business?" a gruff voice demanded. "We're travelers seeking shelter," Ryke answered. "We can pay or trade for supplies. We mean no harm." The eye flicked to Zara, who stood a few paces behind, her beastly features visible. A tense silence followed. Then, the gate creaked open, revealing a middle-aged man wearing a dusty duster and a wide-brimmed hat. A battered shotgun rested in his arms. "Name's Duran," he said curtly. "State your terms." Zara kept her distance, letting Ryke do the talking. Carefully, Ryke produced a small pouch of salvage, a few energy cells, a nearly full canteen of filtered water, and some ration packs. "We need a place to rest for the night. Maybe a chance to buy or trade for more water." Duran's gaze swept over the offering. He grunted. "We don't see many visitors. Step in, but keep your weapons holstered unless you want trouble." They entered the outpost. Within its walls, a few dusty huts clustered around a central courtyard of packed earth. A leaning tower soared overhead, presumably the station's namesake. From battered loudspeakers at the top, a loop of static-laced radio transmissions played, indicating the tower might still attempt to communicate with the outside world. A handful of other residents watched them warily from doorways. It was clear that beastfolk were not common guests. Zara bore their stares with cool indifference, though Ryke sensed her tension. Duran gestured them toward a communal area, a makeshift bar or canteen, under a corrugated roof. There, they found a lean woman wiping down a counter. Her hair was braided, and she had the air of someone who had long endured the desert's harshness. "Rasa," Duran called. "These folk need a meal and a rest. Think you can manage that?" She eyed the newcomers, especially Zara, but nodded. "All right. Water's scarce. We can't spare much." Ryke placed the canteen on the counter. "We have our own supply. Some ration packs. A corner to sleep would be enough." Rasa's gaze swept over the canteen. "Keep your water. I'll sell you a little more for your energy cells. As for sleeping, you can use the storeroom. It isn't luxurious, but it's safer than the open desert." Zara inclined her head in thanks, though her expression remained guarded. The hours that followed offered a tenuous respite. They ate a sparse meal of dried meats and coarse bread. Ryke accepted a small portion of water to refill his canteen. Zara kept mostly to herself, tail flicking in discomfort under the townsfolk's curious or wary stares. Later, as dusk fell, they retreated to the storeroom, a cramped space behind the canteen. Its walls were lined with crates of dried goods and old mechanical parts. The floor was bare concrete, but it was better than sleeping outside amid the dunes. Ryke set down his gear and glanced at Zara, who stood in the corner, arms folded. "We should keep watch. Irida might send scouts to track us." She nodded. "I'll take first watch." He settled down, exhaustion tugging at his limbs. Though he tried to rest, his mind whirled with thoughts of the destroyed vault, of Irida's looming threat, of the ghostly legacy of the beast folk. Eventually, his weariness overwhelmed him, and he slipped into a fitful doze. Sometime later, perhaps a few hours, Zara roused him with a light touch on his shoulder. "Your turn," she murmured. Ryke rose, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Zara sank onto a crate, curling her tail around herself as she closed her eyes. He watched her for a moment, pondering the strange path that had bound their fates together. He stepped outside, scanning the outpost's interior under the moonlight. All seemed quiet. Most dwellers had retired for the night, though a single lantern glowed near the tower's base. The radio above still emitted faint static. Occasionally, the wind carried distant howls, a desert predator, or the moan of shifting metal. As Ryke made his rounds, he noticed Duran perched on a small balcony of the tower, shotgun across his lap. The older man glanced down. "Trouble sleeping." Ryke shrugged. "I'm keeping watch. We're on the move at dawn." Darren tapped a small tin of tobacco. "Where are you heading?" After a pause, Ryke said, "We're trying to stay ahead of a warlord named Irida." A low whistle escaped Duran's lips. "She's trouble. Word is, she's been scouring the desert for something big." Ryke nodded. "We put an end to her plans. She might be hunting us." Duran spat over the railing. "If that's the case, you'd best not linger here. We can't afford a confrontation." Ryke understood the unspoken meaning. People in the outpost had little in the way of defenses. If Irida came with force, they would stand no chance. "We'll be gone by sunrise," he promised quietly. Darren seemed to accept that. He returned to scanning the horizon. Ryke continued his patrol, circling the perimeter. Each moment, he expected to see the telltale dust trails of an approaching warband, but no movement stirred among the dunes. By the time dawn lightened the sky, he re-entered the storeroom, where Zara had begun to stir. Her ears twitched, listening intently to the early rustle of the outpost's residents. "We should leave soon," Ryke said. She stretched, popping her neck. "Good. I prefer to move before the sun becomes too fierce." Gathering their belongings, they stepped into the main courtyard. Rasa was already up, doling out meager portions of water to a few children. The children gawked at Zara, but she offered no hostility, merely nodding politely. Darren approached, collecting the energy cells Ryke had promised. He offered a short farewell. "Travel safe. I've heard rumors of some old settlements north of here, but can't say if any remain habitable." Zara and Ryke exchanged glances. North was their best guess, but they had no definite destination. Their sole imperative was to remain free of Irida's grasp. They left Amber Spire Station, the gate creaking shut behind them. The desert greeted them with a blast of heated wind. Still, it felt a small triumph to have rested under a roof, if only for one night. Their journey resumed with the same punishing routine: walk through the early hours, seek shelter at midday, and move again by twilight. The dunes shifted in color from pale gold to deep rust, reflecting the sun's fierce rays. Occasionally, they spotted sun-bleached bones or scraps of cloth remnants of travelers who had failed to cross these wastes. Days stretched into a week. They encountered few souls, mainly travelers who gave them a wide berth or small enclaves, suspicious of strangers. Rumors of Irida's ire drifted across the sands like a dark tide. Some said the warlord had consolidated her forces near the southern canyons. Others that she'd marched west to challenge a rival. None could confirm her whereabouts. At times, Zara insisted on detours, guided by her instincts. She noticed subtle tracks or distant shapes that Ryke failed to see. Her Beastwoman senses proved invaluable in avoiding potential ambushes. For his part, Ryke's mechanical expertise kept their weapons and the filtration device functional. Each day they survived. They honed their teamwork further. One evening, as they camped beside a half-buried ruin, Zara spoke of her clan. "I was once a sentinel for my people, charged with safeguarding our territory from raiders. One night, I failed. My watch was found wanting, and a band of slavers crept in. My clan's elder blamed me for the losses. I was exiled. I've roamed alone ever since." Ryke nodded, empathy flickering in his eyes. They needed a scapegoat. Her shoulders tensed. "Yes, perhaps so, but I still bear the shame. Even if the clan realized its mistake, I doubt they'd welcome me back." Ryke stared into the flickering glow of their small fire. "Sometimes, we find a new purpose, one that goes beyond the old ties." She bowed her head, ears flattened in uncertain emotion. "Is that what you found?" "With me," he gave a faint chuckle. "Strange as it sounds, yes. I never expected that searing day, when you pinned me in the sand, would lead to this." Her lips curved slightly, betraying a rare hint of amusement. "I suppose fate is a curious master." They let silence envelop them, content in each other's presence. Later, in the early morning gloom, Ryke awakened to Zara's urgent whisper. "We have visitors!" He snapped, alert, reaching for his rifle. She pointed toward a rocky ridge some distance away. In the dim starlight, he could just make out silhouettes of figures watching them, 4, maybe 5. Their posture suggested they were armed. Zara hissed softly. "Could be raiders. Let's vanish before they close in." They hastily packed their scant belongings. With Zara leading, they skirted around the far side of the ruined structure, seeking to put distance between themselves and the Watchers. The horizon gradually lightened. The Watchers did not follow, seemingly content to let them pass. Still, the encounter rattled them. Even if those Watchers were not Arita's minions, there were plenty of dangers in Suncrash Valley. The pair pressed on, searching for friendlier ground. At midday, they found a shallow cave carved into a rocky bluff, a place to hide from the sun's fury. Within its cool darkness, they sipped water and nibbled rations. Ryke studied a battered holomap device, trying to glean any clue of a settlement or region they might safely occupy. Most data was outdated by decades. Zara rummaged through her pack, withdrawing an odd-shaped metal sphere, a salvage item from the vault, possibly some scanning device. "I forgot we had this," she said. "Think it's worth anything." Ryke examined it. "Maybe. Let me see if I can power it up." He fiddled with the device, linking it to a small battery. Suddenly, the sphere emitted a low hum and projected a flickering hologram into the air. Lines and arcs coalesced into a partial map. Zara's eyes widened. The projection displayed a portion of Suncrash Valley, overlaid with cryptic notations. Ryke recognized references to Empyrean outposts, but one marker stood out near the southwestern quadrant, labeled Project Eden. A cluster of swirling lines suggested a green area, an impossibility in this desert. He adjusted the sphere, coaxing more data. The hologram resolved into a text snippet: Project Eden, terraforming initiative, status, partial implementation. Then it flickered out. Zara stared at him in amazement. Terraforming. They tried to reshape the land. Ryke's mind raced. Long ago, the Empyrean core had advanced technologies. Perhaps they sought to reclaim a portion of the desert, turning it into arable land. If any of that infrastructure remains functional, it might be a place of refuge. Zara let out a slow breath, her tail stirring the dust. An oasis, or a legend. But if it exists, we should find it. It could be our best hope, unless Arita already knows. They quickly conferred, deciding to shift their course southwest. If Project Eden's terraforming system still produced water or vegetation, they could replenish and possibly even find a permanent sanctuary. The idea of a hidden oasis in a land of endless sand stirred a spark of optimism, no matter how faint. Traveling southwest meant entering regions rumored to be controlled by smaller warlord factions. But the promise of Eden overshadowed the risk. Each step across the dunes felt charged with anticipation. They kept the sphere close, occasionally reactivating it to check the partial map. Days passed in a grueling march. Their rations dwindled, forcing them to rely more heavily on the filtration unit. At times, they had to scrounge for edible desert cactus or hunt small lizards. Zara's keen senses proved invaluable for tracking prey. Ryke occasionally improvised traps or used his rifle set to a low beam. At night, they studied the stars, matching their position to the sphere's projection. The southwestern horizon gradually revealed new landscapes, jagged plateaus, ancient riverbeds, and ridges that soared like the spines of slumbering beasts. They encountered scattered ruins, watchtowers, bunkers, even an old outpost that had collapsed into a canyon. But no sign of an oasis. As their hope began to waver, they discovered a fresh clue, a series of half-buried pylons, each bearing the Empyrean insignia. These pylons formed a line, heading deeper into the southwestern desert. Possibly, they had once served as markers for a terraforming zone boundary. Ryke and Zara followed them, hearts pounding with renewed determination. Then, late one afternoon, they crested a ridge and saw before them a sight both wondrous and haunting, a vast field of metal conduits and vents, many toppled by time, but some still standing. Faint plumes of steam or mist drifted from certain vents. The sphere's map glowed in confirmation. This was the outer ring of Project Eden. Zara inhaled sharply, eyes gleaming. "Look, do you see that shimmer?" "Water vapor." Ryke nodded, hastening down the ridge. Even at a distance, the air felt subtly cooler, as if some great mechanism lay beneath the sands, pumping out moisture. Could the ancient terraforming engines still function? They traversed the maze of conduits, stepping over rusted walkways. Occasional control panels jutted from the ground, their screens dark. Yet a low hum of hidden machinery resonated beneath their feet. At last, they reached a large central structure, an immense dome half buried in sand, flanked by tall spires. A circular hatch stood at the dome's base. Faded letters spelled out, "EDN Primary." Zara pressed her ear to the hatch, listening for signs of life. "It's active. Somehow. I hear machinery." Ryke tried the hatch wheel. It resisted, but a few twists broke the seal. With a rush of moist air, it swung open, revealing a dimly lit corridor beyond remarkably cooler than the scorching desert. A faint, steady drip echoed in the darkness. They ventured inside, flashlights scanning a corridor lined with pipes. Condensation beaded along the walls, a sign that water or coolant systems still operated. Proceeding deeper, they reached a wide chamber dominated by a towering machine. Gauges and valves hissed softly. Overhead, vents exhaled a faint mist. In a far corner, a small pool of water had collected, dripping from a ruptured pipe. Zara's eyes lit with joy. Without waiting, she crouched and scooped up a handful of the clear liquid. Ryke quickly tested it with a portable kit, verifying it was not contaminated. The results glowed green. It was safe, an astonishing miracle in this wasteland. They drank, the cool water a balm to their parched throats. The sense of relief was palpable. For a few moments, they simply reveled in the life-giving liquid. Then, curiosity led them onward, deeper into the structure. Past the machine chamber, they found a control room. Dim monitors displayed readouts of subterranean turbines, greenhouse systems, and atmospheric sensors. It seemed the facility was partially operational, still following ancient protocols to hydrate and enrich a limited area of land. However, many panels blinked red with errors. A partial text scrolled across one screen, warning, "System degradation at 73%, reactor output minimal. Automated reclamation cycle stalled. Reinitialize or risk total shutdown." Zara peered at Ryke. "Can you fix it?" He studied the controls, heart beating with excitement. "I might, if we can restore enough power to run the full terraforming cycle." We could transform an entire swath of desert, or at least preserve a stable oasis. She stared around them, a gleam of hope in her feral eyes. That would be a miracle, yet a chill settled on them both. If they could reactivate this place, they would create a beacon of life in the wasteland, but also a target for Arita. The warlord would stop at nothing to claim such a resource. Still, the temptation was too great. Together, they decided to at least attempt repairs. Ryke rummaged through the facility, searching for manuals or spare parts, while Zara scouted the perimeter to ensure no immediate threat lurked. Hours stretched into a day, then another. Ryke labored by the flickering lights, patching leaks and bypassing failed nodes. Finally, his efforts bore fruit. On the third day in Eden Primary, the overhead lights brightened noticeably. Deep below, the sound of turbines intensified. A console beeped. Reclamation cycle online. Biome stabilization, 5%. Zara, returning from a perimeter check, hurried into the control room, panting slightly. Ryke! Something's happening outside. They rushed to the dome's exterior. Sure enough, the vents that dotted the land around the facility were spewing a fine mist into the air. Beneath their feet, the sand felt cool and damp. Even the scorching desert wind seemed tempered. Zara knelt, running her claws through the moistened soil. If this continues, in a matter of weeks or months, this place could begin to bloom. Ryke swallowed a surge of emotion. We've done it. This could become a true oasis, perhaps large enough for a settlement. Zara's expression grew solemn. But what of Arita? If word of this spreads, she'll come, and she won't be alone. Every warlord in Suncrash will want control of such a treasure. He ran a hand over his stubbled chin. We can defend it, or try. Maybe even bring others who yearn to live free of warlords. This place might be the start of something new. She met his gaze, her golden eyes reflecting a cautious hope. Then we must prepare. This facility, though wondrous, is fragile. One well-placed explosive could cripple it for good. He nodded firmly. Then we fortify. We find others who share our vision, people who want to build rather than conquer. If Arita comes, we'll fight. Thus began a new chapter in their saga. Rather than fleeing aimlessly, they had a purpose: to defend and nurture Eden Primary, to transform the desert from a realm of death into a sanctuary. It was a grand ambition, perhaps naive, but undeniably bold. Days turned into a week as they settled into the facility. Ryke maintained the systems, coaxing more of the terraforming cycle to function. Zara patrolled the perimeter. She set traps, scouted vantage points, and honed her senses against potential intruders. They scavenged for supplies in nearby ruins, retrieving old metal to patch weak points in the dome's structure. Slowly, word trickled out. A few drifters appeared at the edges of Eden Primary, drawn by rumors of cool air and water. Most were refugees or exiles, desperate for respite. Zara and Ryke offered them a chance to stay provided. They respected the sanctity of the place and offered labor in return. Surprisingly, some accepted. They contributed what skills they had: farming, knowledge, mechanical aptitude, or mere willingness to haul debris. The beginnings of a nascent settlement took shape around the dome. Makeshift huts sprang up. The daily labor was grueling, but the reward of fresh water and a safer haven was irresistible. All the while, the name of Arita weighed on everyone's mind. Patrols were formed, though they had few weapons. Zara took charge of training volunteers in basic self-defense, her Beastwoman reflexes earning admiration and fear in equal measure. Ryke oversaw the stockpile of salvaged arms, ensuring each had at least minimal power cells. As more travelers arrived, news of the warlord's movements filtered in. Arita was rumored to be rebuilding her forces, forging alliances with other desert factions. Vengeance simmered beneath her ambitions. When at last, she learned of Eden Primary, none doubted she would come to claim it. One evening, as the settlement's few dozen inhabitants gathered around a communal fire, Zara and Ryke laid out a plan. "We must stand united," Ryke said, voice echoing among the newly built shelters. "Arita, will test our resolve. But this place is hope that the desert can become fertile, that we can live without fear of warlords. Zara paced the circle, tail lashing. I was born of the Empire's experiments. Many of you were born into a land of hardship, but we share a dream now. We will fight tooth and claw to protect it. A murmur rippled through the assembled. Some bore haunted expressions, uncertain if they had the fortitude to resist a warlord's army. Others clutched weapons, faces set with grim determination. That night, the settlement prepared for a siege. Makeshift barricades went up around the perimeter. Volunteers stood watch in shifts. Word was dispatched secretly to a few outposts, rumored to resist the warlords, inviting them to join Eden's cause, or at least to stand in solidarity. Whether those pleas would be answered, no one could be sure. Days passed. The settlement's growth continued, as did the slow greening of the earth around the facility. Small shoots of desert grass began to poke through the soil near the vents. Mist gathered each morning, creating dew that glittered like diamonds in the sunrise. For the first time in living memory, the desert air smelled faintly of fresh growth. Zara, standing atop a newly erected watchtower, surveyed the horizon with a mixture of pride and dread. She recalled how, not so long ago, she roamed alone, ambushing travelers for scraps. Now, she helped guide a fledgling community, forging alliances instead of sowing terror. The transformation felt surreal. Ryke approached, climbing the tower's ladder with careful steps. Any sign of Arita? Zara shook her head. Not yet. But we both know she's out there. He nodded, scanning the distance. We can't hide from her forever. Maybe we should try to strike a bargain offer trade or neutrality. Zara bared her teeth. Arita doesn't bargain. She conquers. She'll see this place as a prize, especially once she realizes the terraforming systems are active. Ryke exhaled slowly. Then we prepare for war. She turned to him, a flicker of worry in her eyes. People will die, Ryke, possibly many. I won't let Eden fall, but I hate the thought of more bloodshed. He rested a hand on her shoulder, feeling the tension in her muscles. Sometimes, to defend what matters, we have no choice. But we'll do everything possible to protect these people. A distant bugle call interrupted their conversation. One of the perimeter scouts sounded an alarm. Zara's ears perked, tail bristling. Something's coming. Together, they descended the tower in haste, rallying the settlement's handful of defenders. The main gate was a crude barricade of salvaged metal, manned by anxious volunteers. Beyond it, a dust plume rose in the desert. At first, Ryke feared it was Arita's warband, but then he spotted a single vehicle, a battered crawler, approaching at moderate speed. The scout at the gate shouted, "They're bearing a white flag." Zara frowned. That's unusual. The crawler rattled to a halt some distance away, its engine sputtering. A lone figure emerged, arms raised in a gesture of peace. From behind the barricade, Ryke raised a hand. "Identify yourself." "I am Rays of the Northern Freeholds," the newcomer called. "I come seeking audience, no violence." Zara studied the figure. A tall man clad in patched armor, hair bound in a top knot. He carried weapons, but kept them sheathed. His posture was not overtly hostile. Ryke signaled for the gate to be opened. A few defenders parted the barricade to allow Rays inside. The man stepped forward carefully, eyes roaming over the settlement's features, the partially greened soil, the dome rising beyond. He bowed slightly in greeting. "So, the rumors are true. A hidden oasis in the making." Zara crossed her arms, her tone guarded. "Why have you come?" Rays met her gaze. "The Northern Freeholds have heard that Arita plans to march south with a large force. Word is, she intends to seize a place called Eden, rumored to be revitalizing the land. When we learned this, we decided to find out the truth and offer an alliance. If you'll have us." A collective murmur arose among the settlement's defenders. Ryke stepped forward, adrenaline tightening his voice. "You're saying Arita is on the move?" Rays nodded grimly. "Yes, she's rallied warbands from the eastern dunes, promising them wealth and dominion over the new oasis. They march under her banner, The northern freeholds do not wish to see one warlord control the entire desert, so we came to see if we might aid in defending this place. Zara's eyes narrowed, and in return, "What do you expect?" Rays shrugged. "Our people hope to share in Eden's bounty if you succeed. We are not conquerors, but we struggle in the desert like all. If this terraforming technology truly works, it could give life to many." Ryke and Zara exchanged glances. They sensed no immediate duplicity in Rays' manner. Indeed, they needed all the help they could get. Finally, Ryke extended a hand. "If you truly stand against Arita, then welcome. We'll share our water, and we'll fight side by side to protect it." A flicker of relief crossed Rays' face. He clasped Ryke's hand. "Thank you. I have a small contingent of scouts parked beyond the dunes. We'd like to set camp nearby." Zara motioned to a guard. "Escort them. But keep a close eye." So it was that Eden gained its first official allies. Over the following days, more people trickled in scruffy desert drifters, small militias from distant enclaves, a few beastfolk clans that had caught wind of Zara's presence and the promise of sanctuary. The settlement's population swelled. Though resources remained painfully limited, each sunrise brought new challenges: shelter, rationing, organization of defenses, and overhead. The dome's terraforming systems continued their quiet work. Little by little, the desert dust gave way to patches of hardy shrubs, and the air took on a faint, earthy scent. It was a fragile miracle, balanced on the edge of an approaching storm. Then came the day when the dust plumes on the horizon could not be mistaken for anything but an army. Arita had arrived. A hush fell across Eden's settlement as lookouts spotted the massive formation cresting the dunes. Armored vehicles, warbikes, ranks of foot soldiers hundreds strong, banners bearing Arita's sigil. The Black Hawk fluttered in the scorching wind. The warlord herself was likely at the forefront, her mechanical arm glinting in the sun. Ryke stood on the newly reinforced barricade, scanning the formidable host with a nod of apprehension in his gut. Beside him, Zara crouched, claws flexing. Rays joined them, face grim. "Our scouts estimate at least 200 fighters, maybe more. She's mustered greater numbers than we anticipated." Ryke swallowed. "We have maybe 50 capable defenders, plus a handful of non-combatants. Our position is stronger, but the odds remain dire." Zara's ears flattened. "Then we must rely on fortifications and cunning. Arita will likely demand our surrender first. We must refuse." Sure enough, as Arita's forces arrayed themselves about a half-mile from Eden's perimeter, a lone figure rode forward on a sleek desert bike. An amplified voice boomed, "People of Eden, by order of warlord Arita, you are commanded to open your gates and submit. Any who resist will be destroyed." The settlement's defenders exchanged tense glances. Ryke pulled a crudely rigged microphone from within the barricade, patching it into a loudspeaker. In as steady a voice as he could muster, he replied, "Eden belongs to no warlord. We will not surrender." An angry buzz from the warband followed. The lone figure on the bike spat in the sand, then turned and rode back to the lines. Moments later, war drums thundered an ancient tradition among the desert warlords, signifying the start of battle. Zara exhaled, a low growl escaping her throat. "Here it comes," cannons roared, sending shells crashing into the settlement's outer defenses. Hasty bunkers of sandbags and scrap metal shook under the impact. Ryke and Rays yelled for defenders to hold position, returning fire with salvaged rifles and a few heavier weapons scavenged from old outposts. Arita's lines advanced, wave after wave. Vehicles thundered forward, machine guns spitting lead. The defenders crouched behind barricades, unleashing carefully aimed shots. Some of Rays' men fired rocket-propelled grenades, striking an armored buggy and sending it up in flames. Cheers rose from the walls, quickly cut short as retaliatory fire battered them. Zara leapt to a vantage point on a partially collapsed tower. From there, she picked off enemy gunners with uncanny precision, her enhanced senses allowing her to track their movements amid the chaos. However, Arita's numbers began to tell. More vehicles circled, searching for weak points, while foot soldiers pressed forward under covering fire. Sand whipped the battlefield in swirling gusts. Smoke and dust mixed, obscuring vision. Amid the confusion, a group of enemy raiders slipped close to Eden's perimeter, planting charges on a section of the barricade. An explosion rocked the settlement, tearing a gap in the defenses. "Breach on the south side," someone shouted. Ryke sprinted toward the breach, heart pounding. Scores of defenders rushed to repel the invaders. Gunfire lit the dusty air. He caught a glimpse of Arita herself, stepping through the swirling smoke, her mechanical arm raised. She fired some kind of energy blast that disintegrated a chunk of barricade. The defenders there scattered, some falling to the ground, lifeless. Zara snarled, launching herself down from the tower to engage the onslaught. Ray's fighters joined her, forming a desperate line. The clash became a brutal melee, swords and claws and rifle butts colliding in the swirling haze. Amid this chaos, Ryke found himself face to face with Arita. She loomed tall, clad in black armor. Her left arm ended in a mechanical gauntlet that crackled with energy. A cruel smile curled her lips. "You're the saboteur who destroyed my precious vault," she hissed, leveling her gauntlet at him. "Now you'll pay." Ryke barely dove aside as a beam of searing energy lanced out, scorching the earth where he had stood. He fired his rifle in return, but Arita's armor deflected much of the blast. She closed in, mechanical hand clamping around the rifle's barrel. With inhuman strength, she tore it free and flung it aside. Before she could strike again, Zara pounced into the fray, tackling Arita from behind. They rolled in a tangle of limbs, Zara's claws raking the warlord's armor. Arita roared, throwing Zara off with a surge of mechanical force. "Mutant beast," the warlord spat. "I'll relish breaking you," Zara coughed, wiping blood from her lip. "You'll try." The war raged around them. Defenders fell. Arita's losses also mounted. But her troops continued to press. Overhead, mortar shells arced into the settlement, damaging the dome's outer shell. Alarms shrieked as the terraforming system took hits. Ryke rose shakily, retrieving a fallen pistol. He aimed at Arita's flank, firing several shots. Her mechanical gauntlet deflected them with arcs of sparking energy. Zara lunged again, slashing at Arita's unarmored side. The warlord hissed in pain, staggering, angered. Arita unleashed a devastating backhand with her gauntlet, sending Zara crashing into a pile of debris. With the Beastwoman momentarily down, Arita refocused on Ryke. "Die a meddler," she snarled, raising the gauntlet. A brilliant flash erupted before Ryke, but in that split second, he activated a stolen device strapped to his belt, an EMP emitter, scavenged from the old labs. The wave of electromagnetic force rippled outward, short-circuiting electronics in the immediate vicinity. Arita's gauntlet sputtered, the energy buildup discharging harmlessly to the side. Seizing the moment, Ryke lunged forward, slamming the butt of his pistol into the warlord's jaw. Arita reeled, cursing. Before she could recover, Zara reappeared, battered but furious, delivering a sweeping kick that knocked Arita to the ground. Panting, they pinned her, pressing weapons to her chest. Around them, the battlefield quieted as the fighting waned. Many of Arita's raiders, seeing their leader subdued and faced with continued resistance, began to flee or surrender. Ray's fighters and Eden's defenders moved to secure the perimeter, disarming those who yielded. Arita spat blood, glaring with unbridled hatred. "Finish me if you dare. Another warlord will simply rise to take my place." Ryke, chest heaving, locked eyes with Zara. She nodded, a somber understanding passing between them. Enough blood had been spilled already. Zara addressed the warlord with a snarl. "We won't let you turn Eden into another seat of tyranny. Your quest to harness the labs is over." Arita sneered, though she seemed to realize her position was hopeless. "If you let me live, I'll return and burn this place." But then Ray's, approaching with his men, shook his head. "No, you won't. We'll exile you to the Black Dunes with no supplies. The desert will decide your fate." Defiance flickered in Arita's eyes. but she could do little with her mechanical arm crippled by the EMP. The defenders bound her, dragging her away. In the aftermath, Eden's settlement surveyed the devastation. Casualties were significant, perhaps a dozen defenders lay dead, and many more injured. However, the dome still stood, and the terraforming systems were mostly intact. Once repairs were made, Eden's transformation could continue. That evening, as the sun set over the battered settlement, the survivors began the grim work of rebuilding. Structures were repaired, wounded tended. A mass funeral was held for those who had fallen. Zara and Ryke, exhausted but victorious, found a moment of quiet amid the rubble. They walked along the perimeter, now strewn with shattered vehicles and debris. The air smelled of gunpowder and scorched metal, mingled with the faint sweetness of the blossoming oasis. Zara sighed, her golden eyes distant. "It's over. Arita is defeated, at least for now." Ryke nodded, recalling the warlord's final curses. "But you're right that another might rise someday. The desert won't change overnight." She turned to him, her expression softening. "No, but we've carved out a place of hope. That's more than I ever thought possible." Ryke reached for her hand. She let him, her claws gently resting against his palm. In that simple gesture was the recognition of all they had endured, from a fateful ambush in the scorching dunes to the forging of a community that defied the brutal ways of Suncrash Valley. Days later, with the walls repaired and the settlement forging new alliances, a tentative peace settled over Eden. Word spread of a sanctuary in the desert, defended by a Beastwoman Renegade and a wandering soldier, where water flowed and green shoots grew. Some called it a fool's dream, others, seeking freedom, made the trek to see it for themselves. By the time the next harvest moon rose, Eden was no longer a secret. It had become a beacon, a testament to what determination and unity could achieve. And if the warlords of the desert still harbored ambitions, they now faced a fortified bastion, protected by hearts, unafraid to fight for a better tomorrow. On one calm evening, Ryke and Zara strolled along a newly sprouted patch of desert grass, pale green under the shimmering starlight. The hum of the terraforming engines rumbled beneath their feet. "Look at this place," Ryke marveled, touching a tender leaf. "It's unbelievable." Zara's ears flicked in quiet contentment. "We made it so. Not alone, but with many hands. Who would have guessed the same desert that tried to kill us could become our home?" They paused by a small water channel, the gentle trickle a symphony of life in the silent waste. Ryke turned to Zara, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "I owe you a debt, you know. You spared me when you could have killed me. My life took a new path because of that moment." She arched a brow playfully. "You mean when I seized you as my spoils?" He chuckled. "Yes, that. Strange how fate works." Zara stepped closer, her fierce features softened by the moonlight. "We share this victory. Without your courage, the vault might still stand. Without your skill, Eden would not exist." They stood there, hearts full, gazing at a future that suddenly seemed far brighter than the bleak desert sands they had once known. Amid the quiet swirl of night wind, a warmth of genuine affection blossomed between them. Suncrash Valley was still wild, filled with lurking dangers, and the world beyond remained uncertain. Yet here, at Eden, they had carved out a sanctuary of hope, and in doing so, they had found something precious in each other's company. And so, with content hearts, they continued to walk along Eden's gently flowing water, breathing in the promise of a tomorrow shaped not by cruelty, but by resolve and unity. The seeds of life, both literal and metaphorical, had taken root in that once barren land. No matter what the future held, in this moment, it was enough to know that they had defied the odds and found a new beginning.